Good morning, or I guess this is evening. This is Imperfect Politics. And I just saw this online. Looks like Alberta just um, sent out a notice to invoke this Sovereignty Act. Woohoo, you know. Anyways, there's going to be lots of clicking on this video, yada yada yada, because of course I have to work while making YouTube videos because lots of work and YouTube algorithm needs me to make videos every single day or else they shut down. Whoop-dee-who. Anyways. So let's see what the Premier has to say about invoking this act.
And ensuring that we have sufficient baseload power to distribution, which will make life more expensive for families and put the reliability of our grid at risk. And they're pushing ahead with their plan, even though Section 92A of the Constitution of Canada is clear that legislating and regulating the development of electricity falls within the jurisdiction of the provinces. Alberta's government is committed to protecting Albertans from federal overreach.
So apparently they invoked the Sovereignty Act over our electricity grid. I'm assuming this is because of Trudeau's whole green energy, get everything net zero by 2023, which Alberta has said, hey, or 2035, I believe, which Alberta said, hey, we can't do that. We don't have the infrastructure to do that till 2050. But of course, yeah. Does the government listen? No, they do not.
That is why this afternoon I intend to table a resolution in the chamber under the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. We developed this legislation to shield the province from federal intrusions, and we're using it now because the consequences of this particular overreach would be so severe. Alberta will bear the largest share of the expenses required to meet these absurd targets, and consumers and businesses will see their bills soar. If the federal government has its way, many people will be left without electricity that they can pay for on a power grid that will fall short or even fail in a typical Alberta winter or summer.
And holy shit, that would be cold. Hey, minus 40 and we have no heat.
Refuse to go along with this plan. Well, Albertans must have access to affordable and reliable power when and where they need it. It's a matter of health and safety and a matter of financial reality. No one should have to choose between paying their utility bills or buying needed groceries. But it's also a matter of law. As I mentioned earlier, the Constitution is clear. Electricity is a provincial responsibility. The federal government would do well to remember that. They have already lost 2 recent court battles in which their overreach into provincial jurisdiction was struck down by the courts. Ottawa's approach is also at odds with reality. Although Alberta leads the country in renewable investment, we still cannot use it for the majority of our electricity needs. For Albertans to have electricity they can count on, our province needs more baseload power from natural gas. Alberta does not have extensive hydroelectric resources that they enjoy in other provinces. We don't yet have nuclear as they do in Ontario, and that will take a lot of time and money to get there. Natural gas is the foundation of our electricity system in Alberta, and it will be for decades to come. If we don't have enough natural gas baseload power in the coming years, we will have brownouts and blackouts in the dead of winter and in the hottest days of summer. And electricity...
Yeah, let me tell you, and that would not be good. That's... yeah. Freezing in winter. That would... in winter, you'd love to have a basement apartment, and or in summer, you'd love to have a winter or basement apartment. In winter, you'd like to live in the top floor of a house with no windows.
Electricity prices will be astronomical. It's simply too massive a risk for Albertans and Alberta businesses, and it's a risk that we are facing thanks to Ottawa. There's simply not enough natural gas projects coming on stream in Alberta. And the main reason we haven't received enough new applications for natural gas generation is because the federal government has created uncertainty through its proposed electricity regulations, the Impact Assessment Act, and other destructive federal policies. And even though they keep losing in court and in public opinion, it hasn't changed Ottawa's mind. And they continue to push for their net zero electricity grid by 2035. And power providers don't want to move ahead with investments when they can't be sure that there will be any returns. And they can't even be sure that they won't end up in jail. So Alberta's government must act. We can't put the stability of our electricity grid at risk. This is why we're introducing a resolution under the Alberta Sovereignty Within a United Canada Act. Our resolution will ask the legislature for approval to take several actions over the coming months. It asks Cabinet to order all provincial entities to refrain from enforcing or complying with the proposed federal electricity regulations. This obviously doesn't include individuals or private corporations. The resolution asks the government to work with partners.
Yeah, because Alberta is a little bit different with their electrical grid. Everything's privatized here rather than like in Saskatchewan where things are, they have public energy grid. I believe in Ontario, but other than that, I'm not quite sure if any other province has privatized.
Like the Alberta Electric System Operator, the Alberta Utilities Commission, industry, Indigenous communities, and consumers to reform the electric grid with the goal to make electricity in this province more reliable and affordable. And the resolution also urges government to partner with industry and other stakeholders to study the feasibility of setting up an Alberta Crown Corporation to maintain and secure additional reliable, affordable electricity from natural gas if the clean electricity regulations continue to scare away private investors from doing it themselves. We believe in our private market and that Albertans have been well served by it. We will continue to promote private electricity generation, distribution, and retail. We will preserve the interests and value of the hundreds of billions of dollars of capital investment made by Alberta's electricity system by private generators, transmitters, and distributors, and enable continued competition and attraction of private investment into Alberta's electricity sector. However, we also know that Alberta's proposed electricity regulations, if they continue to move forward, would simply put too many Alberta homes and businesses at risk. We need to protect against that. A Crown Corporation, as a provincial entity, could be directed to disregard the proposed federal electricity regulations if need be.
So it seems like she's proposing setting up a hybrid sort of system. So we'll have a system that can do what sort of Saskatchewan's doing, and if things get a little bit nancy with the federal government, we could just we don't have to ask the private companies to go against federal law and not pay the carbon taxes. Alberta would just turn their governmental electrical system on. Seems like that's what she's talking about.
And focus on ensuring we have sufficient electricity from natural gas added to Alberta's grid if private generators are unable to do so due to the risks proposed by the clean electricity regulations. In addition, if the CERs threaten the ability of private generators to continue producing electricity at an existing power plant after 2035, a Crown Corporation could potentially purchase that power plant to maintain that power on the grid to keep the lights on in the province. And it could also partner with investors to de-risk and develop nuclear power and other emerging generation technologies in the province as we move towards carbon neutrality by 2050. These measures are not something that we want to do. They are a plan to counteract the absurd, illogical, unscientific, and unconstitutional interference in Alberta's electrical grid by a federal government that simply doesn't care what happens to our province so long as they have a good virtue signaling story to tell their leftist friends and special interests. We would much rather work with Ottawa on meaningful ways to reduce emissions while continuing to generate reliable, affordable electricity. That's better for all Albertans and Canadians. But we refuse to meekly accept actions which are so plainly destructive to Alberta's economy and to the very safety and security of Alberta citizens. We will do whatever we must to stand up and protect the people of this province. And I'll now invite Minister Nathan Neudorf to say a few words.
Okay, let's just crunch that down a little bit. So I don't really know why. Like, why do you need the Sovereignty Act for that? Like, can't the government just do that under their own discretion? Because all they're doing is making their own power company. That's it. It's not anything. It sounds all like grandstanding to me. I don't know. Whatever.
Thank you, Premier. Good morning, everyone. Today's announcement is about standing up for Albertans. The clean electricity regulations as they are currently written cannot and will not be allowed to come into effect in this province. Ottawa has not yet backed down despite clear modeling from independent regulators that shows their plan is impossible. Their negotiations with provinces have been biased by their electoral ambitions and missed the nuances of our unique energy-only market entirely. Alberta, while committed to carbon neutrality, is unable to achieve such a goal by 2035 without dangerous consequences for Albertan families and job creators. With this resolution, our government's first use of the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act, we are showing that if these clean electricity regulations come into force in 2035, we are willing to do whatever is necessary to ensure Albertans' lights stay on. But this isn't just about keeping lights on. If in 2035 our electricity producers are forced to power down the generators that we rely on under threat of imprisonment, the lights will only be one of Albertans' many worries. Imagine coming home from a vacation only to find your water pipes have frozen and burst. Imagine your kitchen appliances failing you when you need to cook your family a holiday dinner. Imagine the tech.
Well, hopefully they'd give you a little bit of notice before they just shut your power off, but hey, that's just me. I don't know how this fancy energy stuff works.
Technology we rely on for recreation and family time or even work becoming unreliable. These are not cliche circumstances. This is exactly what was happening in places like California and Germany, where they have had to return to baseload power like natural gas and coal. Even Ontario, which has nuclear and hydro resources that we can only yet dream of, they are expanding gas-fired generation to meet their growing demand. We also know that when the temperature drops, wind and solar are often less efficient. This past Wednesday,
and this is Canada. We have lots of snow. It covers the solar panels. Solar panels can't get sun. They don't work. So, yeah. Summer, awesome. Winter, not so much. Same with wind energy. Also, I heard that in about Germany, how they tried to go all green and everything, and once Russia turned off their gas, they were a little bit hooped.
Analysis of wind power generation in Alberta found the province's 44 wind farms managed to produce only 0.3% of their total capacity. At the same time, solar was at zero output because it was during the night. Our province relies on natural gas generators 365 days a year to fuel all of these essentials and more. It isn't just our government that is taking a stand against the CER. Other provinces are standing with us. And countless Albertans, including business and community leaders, rural and urban, have made their voices heard. This resolution is a last resort. We should not have had to take this step. We wanted the federal government to negotiate with us in good faith so that we can work together and achieve a carbon neutrality by 2050 in a realistic and feasible manner. One where Albertans won't have to worry if they freeze in the dark or have costs go through the roof. Unfortunately, Ottawa has yet to truly demonstrate they are willing to work with us and listen to our realities. If the CERs are put into effect in 2035, the actions in this resolution will ensure that we are prepared to protect the people of this province. Alberta's effort to move towards carbon neutrality by 2050 is an example for the entire world. We lead the country in technology and innovation within the electricity sector. We are leading the charge in researching and building cutting-edge advancements in emissions reduction like carbon capture, hydrogen use, and in the future, small modular reactors. Our province is committed to implementing effective and innovative solutions that will lower our emissions and protect our climate. Our goal of carbon neutrality by 2050 is one shared by many other nations and has been enshrined in international agreements. It is a goal that we can achieve while maintaining grid reliability and affordability. With these clean electricity regulations, Ottawa has shown it is more than willing to overstep its constitutional bounds and infringe upon provincial jurisdiction. Section 92A(1)(c) of Canada's Constitution clearly defines the province's exclusive jurisdiction over electricity generation. We will not surrender our constitutional obligations to govern our electricity grid. Albertans deserve safe, reliable, and affordable electricity when and where they need it. Alberta's government will not allow a future where our electricity producers are threatened with imprisonment and our people are forced to suffer every day under the looming threat of blackouts and brownouts. Today, we show the federal government that Alberta will not abide their attempts at overreach. It is our responsibility to all the people within this province that we stand up for them if this worst-case scenario comes to pass, and that is exactly what we're going to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now go into our media question and answer period. Before that, I just want to remind those on the line and in the room that this press conference is under.
So yeah, pretty much he was just regurgitating the exact same thing the Premier just said. So I'm going to put that in a part 2 video. Separate this up in part 1 and part 2 tomorrow, because man, that was long.
Embargo. Any remarks given fall under the same rules until the motion is introduced at approximately 3 p.m. All materials will be under embargo, as well as this press conference. We'll start with questions in the room. One question, one follow-up, and then go over to the lines. Can I see a show of hands for those in the room? Start off with you, Dean.
Morning, Premier. So it looks like your motion today has kind of 4 main parts. One is, it reiterates the comments you've already made about your concerns with net zero. You ask civil servants to sort of challenge or oppose it, but you make it clear, don't break the law. You tell individuals and private corporations they won't be asked to break the law. And you're looking at creating a working group to renationalize the power grid. So it seems to me you can do all that now. Or maybe I'm missing something. Why do we need the Sovereignty Act to do any of this?
A couple.
Exactly. Like, I don't think Saskatchewan had to do that when they made theirs, because they have their own crown corporation for their power grid. Like I said, just dick swinging. That's all it is.
Of reasons. One is that for Alberta to move to a position where we have to take up a government-owned entity in this market is quite a departure from the past. I think people would be very surprised that we're contemplating that. And we have to make sure that the market knows our intention, that we want them. We want private sector operators to build us more baseload grid. We want the private sector to come forward with natural gas generation, with nuclear generation. But if they don't,
then put out a press conference and say that. Don't come out with like extreme regulation, I guess that's what the Sovereignty Act would be, or wording in the least, just to be like, hey private sector, don't worry, we're just doing this as a backup. God.
Then we will need to step in. So we're sending a message to the market that this is a reluctant entry. I wouldn't characterize it as nationalizing the
Or send them a letter. Do it old school. Very personal.
industry. Alberta Treasury branches plays within the financial services sector, but they certainly do not monopolize it. There are a multitude of other credit unions and banks that people can participate in. So being a participant in the market is very similar to what EPCOR and NMAX already do. EPCOR is a wholly owned entity of the City of Edmonton. NMAX is a wholly owned entity of the City of Calgary. Should we decide to move forward, this would be a wholly owned entity of the province, and it would operate in the market where it is needed as a generator of last resort, not first resort. It's a generator of last resort. So that's one part, is that we wanted people to know why we were departing from a long-standing tradition in this province. We also want to begin the process of engagement.
And how is this going to work exactly as well? Like, so are these plants just going to stand idle until, like, something happens? Or so, like, all the taxpayers are just going to pay for idle energy? That's what this is. It's not going to actually continuously go into the grid to lessen the cost of electricity. Well, that's our tax dollars at work right there. Ooh.
Before we make a final decision. So we will be inviting industry to give us recommendations about how we can move forward and de-risk these proposals. If there's a better way to do it, where we can get baseload power on, then, you know, I'm all ears. I want to hear it. This is just one thing that we potentially could do. The third aspect would be the only way that I could see that we would be able to protect our industry and our markets here and our consumers is by having a Crown corporation, should the federal government continue to proceed with their clean electricity regs. I'm watching with interest what's happening in Saskatchewan. They've come to the same conclusion that they're taking steps now to indemnify the people who are responsible for their power corporations so that they don't end up facing any kind of criminal charges. So we'll watch and see how that goes. But that would be the other part, is that I cannot give direction to a private sector company to define the law, and I won't give direction to a private sector company to do that. But if we operate a Crown corporation, we will do it on the basis that we're only stepping in so that we can make sure that we preserve power. The other aspect to this is we need to make it clear to the courts that we're doing this mindfully. Ultimately, if they proceed on with their plan, this will end up in the court, and we want the Supreme Court to know that we are very considered in the measures that we're taking, that we have paid attention to the two judgments that have come down at the federal court level, including one at the Supreme Court, that we are very mindful, and we've read the Constitution, we believe we know what it says, and that we are staying within our lane. We're not trying to do anything that jumps into federal jurisdiction. We're just trying to exercise the power that the founders gave us under the Constitution.
That still doesn't mean you have to bring in the Sovereignty Act. That's not what it's for. That's not what you said it was for. Like, you could do all of this stuff without having to agitate the federal government.
So ultimately, when we end up in court, the court will understand our mind through the motion that we're putting forward in the legislature. And finally, we hope that the federal government backs down.
Yeah.
I've told them this right from the very beginning. From the very first conversation that I had with our working group, I said, why are you doing this? because we know it won't work here. You're just putting us in a collision course where we'll be fighting with each other for months. Why don't we just work together on a 2050 target? It's been my consistent position from the very moment that I spoke with Justin Trudeau and the ministers that are at the table with us. So I'm hoping that they now understand that we're serious, that we are going to preserve the integrity of our power grid in whatever way we need to, so that we can get back to the table and talk about the ways in which we can.
But we're going to keep integrity, but we're not going to lower prices. No, because that would be bad.
Can agree, and I think there's many areas on which we agree. So those are the reasons.
So I guess that goes back to, so basically the answer is you don't need the Sovereignty Act for any of this. What it does, though, is that it actually draws more attention to it.
Sure.
So, but that's not what the Sovereignty Act was supposed to be about.
What did you think the Sovereignty Act was supposed to be about? Of course it was.
Well, the Gordian, splicing the Gordian knot and putting Ottawa on its lane, and we're going to challenge the laws. We won't enforce laws, and then the first time you use it, you make it clear we're going to follow the law. So, I mean,
Well, sorry to disappoint you, Dean, but this is what it was always
I'm
about.
not disappointed that we're following the law, Premier.
No, I always said, like, this is what I'm asking the federal government to do. I'm asking the federal government to follow the law. The federal government is acting in a way that is disregarding now 2 court decisions that came down. And we are asserting, if you read the Sovereignty Act, you will see that the Sovereignty Act.
Well, yeah, if they are treading on provincial ground, so sue them in court, like other provinces have been doing, like you're already doing. It's normal. The federal government pushes in, you push back. There you go.
Always asserted that we would stand up for our constitutional jurisdiction, stand up for our rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that's what this is doing. And we're doing it through a mechanism of creating, if we need to, a crown corporation so that we can commission natural gas generation. Because here's the issue, Dean, is that the natural gas generation right now, with abatement, can only get to about 60% abatement. That's what we know based on current best available technology. I hope it improves, I really do. But the federal government has said that's not good enough. They've said it has to be 95%. Otherwise, we will use our criminal law power to force people to comply or go to jail. Like, that's where the gap is. We want to be able to work with the federal government on this. But the fact of the matter is we can only go at the pace that technology will allow. So if the federal government doesn't back down, you bet we are going to find a way to get natural gas, nuclear power deployed as well. We're going to continue marching along the path to 2050. And if it means that we're going to end up in court, then I guess we end up in court.
Yeah, to finish my question. But, so, yeah, but the method that you're using does draw attention to it, and I take that point. But I mean, these are emotionally charged words: sovereignty, last resort, that sort of thing. I mean, you've seen some of the criticism on the weekend. Again, it's not X or whatever, but you know, this is the Premier grandstanding again. This is the Premier sort of dressing this thing up again and making it bigger than it needs to be. I mean, you don't need the Sovereignty Act to do any of this. So why are you invoking such emotive terms?
I suspect if the federal government does not back down, this will land in court, and the court will have no mistake about why it is that we're doing this. They won't have to guess. It will be written in a motion that will be read and debated in the legislature and voted on in the legislature. And we also have now created the runway of several months to do engagement where people know exactly where we're heading, and we're creating an opportunity for the federal government to do the right thing and back down.
Just on the issue of the courts, the regulations are not in place yet. Ottawa hasn't finalized any of this. So the courts aren't going to listen they won't be looking at this, will they? Do you expect this to be in court soon? Or?
Oh yes, we have to wait for them to finalize everything. It's not everything it's not like everything that they put forward goes through. It's not like the NDP are really, you know, pro-carbon tax, pro-taxing people in general, anti-oil and gas. I'm sure it's going to fail.
Or is this a more symbolic move right now to try and force the federal government into negotiations because the courts aren't going to deal with this until something, I imagine, comes out of Ottawa that's finalized?
Look, the reaction of Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault has been extraordinarily disappointing. He is acting like the Supreme Court never rendered a decision on the Impact Assessment Act, saying that it is essentially unconstitutional, especially as it relates to projects in Alberta. They're carrying on as if that didn't occur. And so I have to presume that because they've already gazetted the clean electricity regs and they keep telling us that they're going to move to the second stage on this, I have to take them seriously on that. And so if that is going to be the case, I need to start now to make sure that we're commissioning the long-term baseload power that we need. It takes years to build these things. And you've seen how the federal government acts. So they pass a law that's unconstitutional, which they did in 2019. They force us to go to court and wait years to get a judgment. We get a judgment, they ignore it, and then continue on as if it didn't happen in the first place. Or in the case of the plastics decision, they decide to appeal it, to lay it even further. I'm sorry, this province cannot wait 4 or 8 or 10 years for the federal government to stop invading our jurisdiction. We're telling them, stop doing it now so that we can get going as quickly as we need to on commissioning the baseload power that we need. And that's something that I'll have to defer to my, my affordability and utilities minister on. But I can tell you this. We nearly had our grid fail 7 times last winter. We had a level 3 alert. 3 times over the summer, we had a level.
Now this is crazy. I didn't know this, but it's crazy to think about that failure almost happened this many times.
Level 3 alert. These used to be very rare. It used to be 1 every couple of years. We now had 8 within about a 12 to 18 month period. That is a sign that the grid is under stress, and that is a sign that we need to work to bring more baseload power on. And we also know, just from our projections, we're expecting to double the need for electricity between now and 2050. We can't delay. I can't wait for years to fight the federal government back in areas that I know the court has said are unconstitutional. They just have to start following the law.
I'm looking at the sort of follow-up, the Crown Corporation. How do you feel as a libertarian, conservative, now looking at actually the government getting back into the business of generating electricity?
Again, we would be a generator of last resort if it turns out that the private sector is not willing to provide this kind of baseload power. I believe in competition. And choice. And so we do have many ways in which the government already is a player in the market. For instance, the balancing pool is already a Crown Corporation that is in this market. We also have, as I mentioned, Alberta Treasury branches as a Crown Corporation that operates in the financial services market. We have the Alberta Petroleum Marketing Agency, which is an entity that operates on our behalf in the market so that they can move our product. So we do have instances where we have had to create.
But the energy that we're going to produce and the energy that the taxpayers pay for isn't going to go into the market to lower prices. It's just going to be idled.
Create agencies to do this kind of work. This is not at all making a blanket decision that all parts of the electricity system would fall under the provincial government. It's just being a player in this market to be a generator of last resort.
Thanks, Graham. And we'll take one more from the room. Hands. Oh, yeah. Emmanuel? And then to
your resolution doesn't affect individuals or corporations. Well, it just so happens that the electricity market is private. So what difference will it make on the ground?
Okay, I'll tell you what difference it would make on the ground. By establishing, if we choose to go this route, a Crown Corporation, then I would be able to either build or commission the construction of a natural gas plant with best available technology. I would be able to build or commission or work in an MOU with Ontario, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan on developing a suite of small modular nuclear to roll out. We would be able to work with power companies to construct nuclear facilities on our behalf. If we get to a point in 2035 and there are certain power plants that are not meeting federal targets, we can purchase them.
But those are only going to come online if the grid's in trouble. Other than that, it won't be producing electricity, is what she's saying.
and then we can continue to operate them so that they do not end up creating instability in our grid. That would be the reason to do it. I hope none of that happens. I hope we're able to continue with our entirely private sector market, but I can't sit back and allow for the grid to fail, for there to be insufficient investment in baseload power, and for us to see the instability in the grid that we have get worse and worse, or the affordability get worse and worse. We have to act now to make sure that we don't end up with that outcome.
Is it fiscally responsible to create a crown corporation, buy out gigantic power plants, create new ones, when your plants maybe won't even be carbon neutral by 2050, and you would have to shut them down at this time?
Well, look, we are going to do everything we can to get to a carbon neutral status by 2050. And there's a number of ways in which we hope that's going to happen. And if you look at the companies who have set out a 2050 target, some think they might even be able to reach it a couple of years early, like Capital Power. And they talk about carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology, which we are very keen to support. Talk about the increasing use of hydrogen, which we are also keen to support. Bringing in small modular nuclear, which will take many years for us to develop the regulatory approval process, but we're also keen to support that. In addition to direct air capture, that technology is in its infancy, and I think it will be a very important part of the future. And then being able to purchase offset credits, potentially from the international market, using Article 6 so that we can get credit for reducing emissions elsewhere. There's a whole suite of different options available at our disposal, but the point is, we control the electricity grid. The Constitution says so, and we would ask that the federal government respect our jurisdiction.
Thank you. We'll now go over to the phones. Operator, can you put through our first caller, please?
And I think it's been 25 minutes. I think we're going to end it here. Had enough questions about this. I might make a part 1 and part 2 of this just because it's so long, and clean it up a bit later, release another cleaned up video. But like I said, when you're starting out, you gotta release videos every day. Woo! So anywho, comment below, tell me what you think. Is this bringing out the Emergency Act, is that a good thing for this reason? Should we have left it for something a little bit more serious? What do you think about publicly owned power grid? Do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's just a who cares sort of thing? Also, remember to like and subscribe, and please comment. And good night, folks.